spread as far as the Brahma world, and this 10,000-fold world system shook, quaked and trembled, and an immeasurable glorious radiance appeared in the world, surpassing the divine majesty of the Devas. Then the Blessed One uttered this inspired utterance: Kondanya has indeed understood. Kondanya has indeed understood. In this way, the Venerable Kondanya acquired the name Anya Kondanya, Kondanya who has understood. That's the end of the sutta. So you see, when the Buddha gave this discourse, out of 5 monks, only one happened to understand and attain the vision of the Dhamma, that means attain stream entry. The others, it took a few more suttas, they heard a few more suttas before they attained, all of them attain enlightenment. But you see, when the Buddha set in motion this turned the Dhamma wheel, these Devas, they were happy, and they shouted so loud. And one realm after another, they shouted the same thing up to the Brahma heavens. Why were they so happy? Because many of them must have been monks before, monks and nuns in the previous life. That's why they are reborn in the heavens. This Indian belief, if you become a monk or a nun, it's natural that you be reborn in the heaven as a Deva or a Devi. Okay, the next sutta. (56.21). That's on page 1852. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling among the Vajjans at Kotigama. There, the Blessed One addressed the monks thus: Monks, it is because of not understanding and not penetrating the 4 noble truths that you and I have roamed and wandered through this long course of samsara. What for? It is, monks, because of not understanding and not penetrating the noble truth of suffering that you and I have roamed and wandered through this long course of samsara. It is because of not understanding and not penetrating the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering, that you and I have roamed and wandered through this long course of samsara. That noble truth of suffering, monks, has been understood and penetrated. That noble truth of the origin of suffering has been understood and penetrated. That noble truth of the cessation of suffering has been understood and penetrated. That noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering has been understood and penetrated. Craving for existence has been cut off. The conduit to existence has been destroyed. Now there is no more renewed existence. This is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Fortunate One, the teacher, further said, because of not seeing as they are the 4 noble truths, we have wandered through the long course in the various kinds of births. Now these truths have been seen. The conduit to existence is severed. Cut off is the root of suffering. Now there is no more renewed existence. That's the end of the sutta. So it's because of not meeting and understanding the 4 noble truths that all of us have been turning in the samsara, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Now we are very lucky that we have met the true Dhamma, so we should take this opportunity to really study and understand the Buddha's words, so that at least we attain stream entry. Then we will not be reborn in the woeful planes of existence again. And if you are not born in the woeful planes of existence, then there's not much suffering left. So you can take a slow boat out of samsara. There's one thing I want to mention here. The Buddha says the craving for existence has been cut off. Earlier, we in the sutta we read about the 3 types of craving. Craving is the root of suffering. The cause of suffering is craving. And it was mentioned earlier in the sutta that there are 3 types of craving. Craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, and craving for non-existence. Craving for sensual pleasures, I think most of us, we understand. We crave for worldly happiness, worldly enjoyment. That's why we want to seek delight here and there, going here, going there, always looking for enjoyment. Then the second one is craving for existence. This is the will to live. The will to live is very strong. That's when we are dying, most people refuse to let go. So we cling on. Our willpower, our mind is very strong. So the body is breaking up and giving us a lot of suffering. But because our willpower is so strong, we keep clinging. Even though we suffer, also we bear. We keep clinging for many days until it becomes quite torture. And too many days you can't stand it, because all of us we have a threshold of pain beyond a certain limit. We don't want to stand it anymore. Then only we let go. When we let go of the will to live, then only we go for rebirth. So the second condition for the origin of suffering is this craving for existence. The third one is a bit harder for many people to understand. Craving for non-existence. Why is it craving for non-existence will bring you to rebirth, to suffer? This craving for non-existence, there are two types. One is like a person experiences a lot of dukkha. Say, for example, his business collapses because of recession, becomes a bankrupt. So some people commit suicide. They want to die. They want to exterminate themselves. But at the moment of dying, the mind is very agitated. The greed, hatred and delusion is still very strong. So when they die with that kind of mind, then the will, even though they think they don't want to live, but actually they're still clinging to life. I know of somebody who tried to commit suicide. He tried many times to commit suicide. He could not succeed. So eventually one day he went into to a mining pond, a deep mining pond. Jumped into the mining pond. He started to drown. When he was starting to drown, the water starting to swallow the water. Then he panicked. Then he swam out of the pond. So then you see, even though initially he thought he wants to commit suicide, but when he's actually dying, then he realizes, I want to live. Then he swam out of the pond. So a lot of people are like that. Because of delusion, we think we want to die, but actually the will to live is very strong. So that is one type of person who commits suicide. Another type of person in this category, craving for non-existence, is the ascetic. The holy man who is practicing to get out of samsara. The desire is so strong that he practices with too much effort. He goes through all kinds of ascetic practices, like the Buddha. Becomes a naked ascetic. Lives in the deep forest, only on fallen fruits and on the roots and all that. He suffers so much because of the extreme desire to get out of samsara. So he cannot get out of samsara. You remember the first sutta we read in this Samyutta Nikaya? There was the first sutta. What did he say? When I stood still, I sang. When I strove too hard, I was whirled around. So without standing still, without striving, I crossed the flood, the middle path. No effort, you will sink. Too much effort, you get whirled around. So in the case of this ascetic, he got too much effort. He put too much effort. So when a person puts too much effort, this ascetic, his mind is extremely agitated. So when he's agitated, the mind is agitated, he cannot attain Nibbana, because Nibbana is a cool state. The mind is cool. So like a Westerner would say, I have to play it cool. Okay. Now the next sutta, 56.23. At Savatthi, the Buddha said, monks, there are these four noble truths. What four? the noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the way, of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. It is because he has fully awakened to these four noble truths as they really are, that the Tathagata is called the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, Sammasambuddha. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So this sutta says that an Arahant, a Sammasambuddha, attains enlightenment because of fully understanding the Four Noble Truths. So of all the Dhammas taught by the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths are the most important truths. So to attain enlightenment, you must understand fully the Four Noble Truths. 56.24 at Savatthi. Monks, whatever Arahants, Sammasambuddhas in the past fully awakened to things as they really are, all fully awakened to the Four Noble Truths as they really are. Whatever Arahants, Sammasambuddhas in the future will fully awaken to things as they really are. All will fully awaken to the Four Noble Truths as they really are. Whatever Arahants, Sammasambuddhas at present have fully awakened to things as they really are. All have fully awakened to the Four Noble Truths as they really are. What for? The noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Whatever Arahants, Sammasambuddhas, fully awakened ones, will fully awaken, have fully awakened to things as they really are. All have fully awakened to these Four Noble Truths as they really are. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So this sutta also says that all Buddhas and all Arahants, whether past, present or future, all become enlightened because of understanding the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths are extremely important. But understanding of the Four Noble Truths are at different levels. A person who understands at a low level will attain a low attainment, will have a low attainment. Someone who understands at the intermediate stage will have an intermediate attainment. One who understands fully, completely, becomes fully enlightened or liberated. But if you look at the Mahayana books, they like to belittle the Four Noble Truths, the dependent origination, 12 links are dependent origination and all that, saying this is like primary school. But this is not what the Buddha says. The Buddha says it is the most important Dhamma. 56.29 Monks, there are these Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. These are the Four Noble Truths. Of these Four Noble Truths, monks, there is a noble truth that is to be fully understood. There is a noble truth that is to be abandoned. There is a noble truth that is to be realized. There is a noble truth that is to be developed. And what, monks, is the noble truth that is to be fully understood? The noble truth of suffering is to be fully understood. The noble truth of the origin of suffering is to be abandoned. The noble truth of the cessation of suffering is to be realized. The noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering is to be developed. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So here the Buddha says that the noble truth of suffering is to be understood. So we have to understand suffering. Now to understand suffering, we have to know where suffering comes from. And we know suffering comes from attachment to our five aggregates. And also you can say there is suffering because we have a self. We have an identity